The Catholics of Oz is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to episode 2 of Catholics of Oz. Catholics of Oz is a show where we discuss faith, culture, and what's been happening from an Aussie perspective, whether it's synods or science, apostolates and apps, providence or productivity. You can hear it right now on the Catholics of Oz. Hello, I'm Lindsay Sant, and welcome to episode 2 of Catholics of Oz. Joining me today is Caroline. How are you, Caroline?
Well, thanks. How are you, Lindsay?
Good. Good to have you. And Jerry, how are you?
Excellent. Glad to be here.
Excellent. So for episode 2, we're going to be discussing a couple of different topics. But before we get into that, just remember that you can visit Catholics of Oz at SQPN on our Facebook page. You can retweet our episodes on Twitter. You can leave comments and subscribe to our podcasts on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, and any of your other favorite podcast apps. We're also on YouTube. You can listen to the audio there. Just hit the bell to get notifications every time a new episode is coming up. Please leave feedback for us on iTunes because it helps to share the podcast with others. And don't forget also some of the other great podcasts on SQPN. Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, Secrets of Star Trek, Secrets of Technology, Secrets of Doctor Who, and so much more.
Not just secrets.
Yes, well, they're not secrets once they start talking about them. So let's begin by talking about faith going beyond the borders.
Well, I'm actually feeling rather good about this. I think we've all arrived at a very special place, eh? Oh. Spiritually, ecumenically.
How do you make somebody love you without affecting free will?
Welcome to my world, son. You come up with an answer to that one, you let me know.
Yes, I had to work very hard to pass Latin and theology.
Oh, quite. Those are, of course, the most important things.
Oh, yeah.
So for today, we wanted to talk about a very important moment that's happening in the Australian Catholic Church, and that is the 2020 Plenary Council. And the Plenary Council basically is a gathering of the Australian Catholic bishops to consider the future of the Australian Catholic Church. So plenary councils happen in different countries. Bishops can decide to call them when they want to. And the whole idea really is to address a question. There's a question that's being faced by the community of the church in that particular country. And it's addressed at a national level. So the last plenary council that happened in Australia was in 1937. So it's kind of a rare event. And this time around, because of where the church is sitting in Australian society, the bishops have come together and called this council for us to consider what it is that the Australian church needs to do next. One of the big things that the church is asking us to consider as a whole church, not just as the bishops meeting, but as a whole church, is the guiding question, what do you think God is asking of us in Australia at this time? So this plenary council is a long process. It doesn't just happen within the space of a couple of months. It's actually about a 3-year process this time. So the first part of the process is simply to listen, as the bishops have said. And what's being listened to, firstly, is people listening to God in prayer, and then the bishops listening to people's responses to those questions. So far, the council's collected over 30,000 responses from individuals and groups answering this question. And the time to answer this question happened, I think it goes until about March or May or April sometime. I think it's just before Easter or something like that, or before Lent, that Catholics in Australia have time to respond to this question. So this is a positive time and a challenging time and a time to be cautious as well in many ways. The bishops are relying on responses from lay people, and one of the most important things with this plenary council is it is meant to reach out to lay people and give them a voice. Not to say the church should be doing this, the church should be doing that, but really the crux of it is always, how can the church be more Christ-like? So when people look at the church, and obviously I mean the church, the people, not the buildings and anything else, but when they look at the church, how do they see Christ? when they see the people of the church. If the church is the body of Christ, the mystical body of Christ, well, how do people see that? And how do people feel invited to be part of that as well? And we know, I guess, in Australian society that that's not what people see when they see the church, because there are all kinds of different perceptions for whatever reasons, and because of some of the, we'll talk, there's the sex abuse scandal. I mean, that's clearly one of the probably ones at the forefront. And there are other things that people think that the Catholic Church is in Australia. So this council really is to say, well, fine, that's what people think, and they're allowed to think that, but how do we show them that this is really a church that represents the face of Christ in Australian society? So before I say any more, Jerry, you had stumbled across that there was an official theme song, and I know that whenever there's a theme song for something, the first thing that people do is cringe. So great theme song for this or whatever. It's like, remember our high school theme songs or whatever else? Yeah, Caroline's got the lyrics going through. Yeah, I'm not even going to say what it was. No. Yep. But Jerry, there is something pretty special about this song and the theme and the importance of it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Now, the song is called Listen to the Spirit, written, I believe, by a gentleman named Peter Pelikan, double A at the end, if I may be mispronouncing that. And so he's basically given a short note on the Plenary Council website, and just sort of taken us through where he's got the inspiration to include certain things, and why he's done what he's done. So, as you said, incorporates a number of themes that speak to our history, and he's numbered them 1 to 5. First one is that the song invites people to listen to God, but also to reflect and ponder on what it would mean for the church to look like Jesus. And so, number 2, the song begins and ends with a didgeridoo in honour of our Indigenous heritage and in recognition of this continuing voice into our future. So, the didgeridoo is basically almost a cultural symbol of the Aboriginal people, the people who were here before Australia was settled by Europeans, essentially. So, it's a nod and acknowledgement of them. Number 3, the song contains 3 bagpipe sections which reflect the Irish history of the Church in Australia, with a subtle link to the Holy Trinity, which is Mother Church's foundational doctrine. So that's pretty straightforward again.
Can I just jump in there for a second? Because there were, I remember seeing online, there were some people going, bagpipes, wait a minute, they're Scottish. But it turns out that Irish people also do have a history with bagpipes as well, as the musician who wrote the song clarified for people who were scratching their heads. But yeah, please continue.
Sure. And number 4, the song also captures 2 preaching moments, in inverted commas, from Archbishop Mark Coleridge, and they were taken from the Chrism Mass at St. Stephen's Cathedral, 22nd of March 2018. In the third person, he's written that the composer of this song was present, and he recounts that hairs on my arms rose, and my heart was moved as I felt the deep sense of the voice of the Holy Spirit speaking prophetically. And finally, point number 5, the song closes with the sound of the church bells ringing as a sign of a church looking forward into the future as it listens to the Spirit by listening to others. And so I think we're going to play a short excerpt of that at the moment. So again, this is all from the Plenary Council website, plenarycouncil.catholic.org.au. And so let's get it away.
Yep. Just before I do that. Yep. So the song can be played anyway. It's the author or the composer was saying this isn't a song written so much to be used in a liturgical setting, but it's a song for reflection, and a song to call to imagination, to reflect and listen, so on. So it's appropriate for us to share it here on the podcast, and we're just going to share an excerpt of it, just to give people a sense of some of the things that Jared was talking about there, and to hear some of the words that trying to explain what this council is all about. So I'll just cue that up, and here we go.
This is an anointed time, make no mistake about it. A time when we are called in ways we did not see coming into the experience of a new Pentecost.
speak once again through the word and through each other anew. Of a church that shines love's light to the world. Of a church that looks like Jesus. Let's listen to what the Spirit is saying. The voice that brings peace and sets hearts on fire.
So that's just a really short excerpt, and again, you can listen to the rest of that at plenarycouncil.catholic.org.au/song. And again, the whole point is about reflection. Jerry, do you want to add anything else about it?
Well, it's quite contemporary, isn't it? You can almost imagine that being played at, or not quite a worship, like the guitars, the drums. It's something very rather youthful about it. Just in the way it's played. And I suppose the music that we used to, having been as part of youth groups, going to youth conferences, and even at World Youth Day, where they, at one stage they had an evening of a band, up on stage. It sounds very similar to those sort of songs, as well as capturing, as you went through at the start, different parts of the Australian Catholic heritage. So, as well as being, how does he describe it? A call to imagine, reflect, and to listen. You can almost imagine, you just go to the shops, chuck it on your iPad, and listen to it from a you actually might like it.
Yeah,
for what it is, rather than what it's what they're saying it is as well.
Yeah, and I think the whole point of it is to point us at what is the council looking at, and how do we be on fire? How do we be like Christ? And to inspire people to then say something about it as well. Not about the song, because no doubt, whenever you put out a song, it's always going to be subjective. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. There won't, for some people, there won't be enough Latin in it, and others, there won't be enough, I don't know, violin, something, I don't know, whatever it is.
More violin.
Yeah. But Looney Tunes fans, should have been a rubber band or something like that. but yeah, that's true. Yeah. But regardless, the spirit of the song and the question it's asking, where it's urging us, is quite beautiful. So I wanted to talk about the process and then throw it out to us to have a quick chat about it. So the process of the listening part of the council then has been that parish leaders, volunteers, youth group leaders, anyone, school teachers, whatever else, have been asked to now go out and take the process. There's a PDF you can download if you want to be as literal as that, and sit down and have listening groups with people. And the whole point of these listening groups is to answer 3 questions and collect the feedback, and then write a submission online, which then goes directly to the plenary council. And then they ask for contact details if you want to put them in there, in case you say something that they think is important enough to then follow up and find out more about. Now, with 30,000 submissions, I don't know who they're going to follow up with. But I don't know, maybe if someone famous, if you write, I don't know, Elvis Presley, maybe they're like, oh, I want to get in touch with him. I don't know. That was bad. So let's move on. The actual process is about the groups now sitting together and praying. And there's an offered prayer if people want to share it together. There's the listening to the question in the group. What do you think God is asking of us in Australia at this time? And before anyone says anything, there's just a moment of silence for people to think and to reflect about that, because this is done a little bit in prayer, and then to write down their answers. And then the group goes around and shares and listens. Now, the thing is, when the group speaks, and I've seen this done well and I've seen it done poorly as well, when it's done well, people will speak and no one will actually interrupt or respond or react. People just get a chance to say what they want, and then it's left there for people to listen to. And when I've seen it done badly, I've seen people talk over each other. What do you mean we should do this? What do you mean we should do that? Don't we do enough of that already? So really the best part is just the idea of, if you've got a good moderator of a small group, everyone just sits and listens to each other. And then once the listening part is done, they then compile the responses and answer some other follow-up questions. So we thought we might have a go at just answering this question together.
Are we going to do it well, or are we going to do it badly?
Well, we'll find out in a moment, won't we? And this will decide if people move on to episode 3 of our podcast then. So Caroline, we'll throw it over to you first of all. the question is, what do you think God is asking of us in Australia at this time?
Well, I mean, Australia's had a bit of a difficult time with unfortunate events happening in the Catholic Church. We've definitely had a few challenges due to the sexual abuse scandals that we've had. So, I think that the message would be to just pursue with your Catholic faith and don't blame others. Don't let them put you off your faith in God. Basically, we don't go to church for a priest. We don't go to church for any bishops or any popes. We go to church for Jesus. That is why we have our faith. We have our faith in Jesus. So I think that we need to look beyond the human failings, as hurtful and as horrible as it may be, and how sometimes we may feel betrayed by the people who do the wrong thing. And also to recognize that there are many more good priests out there than bad. And we personally have known many good priests and good religious, and they really shine, and we've got to remember that they are the ones that we need to think about and, recognize, and not to give up just because of a few horrible, bad people that have decided to do the wrong thing and pursue in sin. So that to me would be the message, that, to remember that our Catholic faith is a beautiful thing. It has been around for 2,000 or so years, started by Jesus Christ himself. And, we cannot just give up because of a few people who've just given up themselves and chosen to go down the wrong pathway. So I really think that would be the message that we would be getting,
Fantastic. So, Jared, what do you think God is asking of us in Australia at this time?
I sort of broke my answer down into sort of three sections, taking a leaf out of Peter Pelican and numbering them. So first one I got here is just going back to basics. So I think a lot of the focus of people has been on, the sex abuse scandal, which not just, has hit hard in Australia, but it's a worldwide issue. I think it really needs to be able to focus on why we go to church. We don't go to church, as Caroline mentioned, for the one or two, for the people that we see. I mean, it just so happens we all go to the same church, but that's not done because of each other. We go to church and found each other there. Well, you too. You found
we're forced to go together at one point, and then we just kept.
Yeah, we grew out of that though. That was a long time ago.
But getting back to the basis of why we go to church, why we do what we do, why we want to bring our children up in this religion. Sometimes it is easy to fall into what might be a Catholic trap and to just go with the flow. This is what I've always done, and this is what I'm going to teach my children to keep doing. It's almost a very Catholic thing. Not something to be proud of, but it can be a Catholic thing to just keep doing it because that's what we've always done. There's good things about tradition, but if tradition means you just do the same thing because that's what you have always done, then that's where you need to take a look and say, why am I doing this? Just go back to basics. Why are we here? I'm here because of Jesus. I'm here because of the music. I'm here because of, don't be here because your friends are here. That can help. But really, what is your focus? Is Jesus your focus? That's probably where it should be. And that's probably the reason you came in the first place. Maybe getting back to basics. Secondly, getting involved. It's easy to watch a few each week. This is just using daily weekly mass as an example. Easy to watch 3, 4, 5 people doing the same thing every week because they've always done it. They must want to do it, and therefore there's no room for me. Last episode we talked about getting involved, and I'm going to push it again. That it's not just at the younger people, but anyone. If you go to mass, you are allowed to be involved. You might look like an unfamiliar face up there, but no one's saying that you're not allowed to do it because person 1, 2, and 3 have always done it, and that's how it's always got to be. No, you're allowed to be involved, so be involved, enjoy it. Church and almost anything is more enjoyable when you're taking part of it, rather than just taking a passive role. I suppose that's how I see it anyway. And then thirdly, we have something to offer, not just as Australians, but Australian Catholics. Catholics, conservatives, and all those. They look at the culture today and think, going downhill. It's lost, it's damned, it's gone, whatever. Well, that's not necessarily the case. No one is beyond redemption. No one's beyond saving. We have something to offer these people. They might be chasing the money, the fame, the looks, whatever, social, cultural changes, goodness knows what. What doesn't change is Jesus. And what doesn't change is that we have something to offer them. They may not recognize it, and they may not want it, but we still have something to offer. We have to remember and recognize that. It's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Well, that was about $10.
Good one. I like that, yeah.
Thanks, Jerry. In my response to the question, there's a couple of things. I think the one thing I think that maybe God is asking of us as a church community at this time, firstly, I think maybe that is to remember the message that's always been there. God gave us a message through Jesus. And maybe we tend to cloud that message with all kinds of other, things. We try to make it sound more palatable to people and whatever else. Maybe we've accidentally watered it down a little bit to Jesus was a good guy, you be a good person too. And I think maybe one of the things, if the whole purpose of this council is for people to be able to recognize Jesus when they see the church, again, the people who are the church, I wonder if what we're being called to do is reconnect in a much more deeper and more profound way with who the person of Jesus is. Because we tend, in some quarters, I think, to have Jesus as an image of this person, but forget that Jesus is living, the Christ who was born, we just celebrated a month and a bit ago, his birth, and then died and was resurrected 3 days later, and is through his Spirit is working in us. To remember the dynamic and active presence of Jesus, first of all, and to have a good understanding of who this Jesus is, to put it in a really bad teacher kind of way, have some Jesus literacy, if you know what I mean, to actually be aware of who this person is and what they're about. Jesus was a good person, but Jesus was a lot more than that. And Jared, you just beautifully articulated a lot of the things, the idea of redemption and so on. So I think maybe we're being called to re-recognize Jesus in a much deeper way than might have been presented to us in, for example, in our high schooling and other places like that. And I'd go further to say that I think that a greater lay voice is being asked for. And I don't say that because it's not like, power to the lay people, expel all the priests, I'm not on that kind of bandwagon, or, lay people can do a better job. What I'm getting at is that by virtue of our baptism, and this is the Second Vatican Council as well, by virtue of our baptism, we've been given a commission to actually be the voice of the church as well. And I think this is the beauty of the Plenary Council. It's saying you guys are baptized. It's not just us, the priests and bishops, that they're saying we need you. And what they're essentially saying is God needs you. So maybe God is asking us to again, know Jesus in a way that's much more articulate, much deeper, much more reflective, much more theological, rather than simply, again, Jesus was a good bloke who sat in a boat and caught fish and caught men. and in that way, I think if we understand Jesus better, relate to Jesus better, know Jesus better, then we're the ones who are being transformed. And through that transformation, then yes, people can see what the church, they can see Christ in the church and see everything that's beautiful that comes along with that as well. So that's just my initial thoughts. There are all kinds of other things. I think that putting Jesus at the center addresses a lot of issues. We'd be joking if we didn't say that the church wasn't a little bit divided in some areas. We know that there are political divisions. There are, sometimes, and this isn't to criticize any particular party, but, there are older ideas versus newer ideas, the divisions like that, divisions about the roles of men and women in the church, and divisions about, who can do this and who can do that. I think if we put Christ at the center, then all of it starts to make sense again. Then we have a united community. And I think that, the unity of the church community under Christ would be the greatest asset that we could ever have. And I think that would inform any youth programs, any catechesis programs, any future, gatherings or things that the church does as well. So those are my 2 cents. Does anyone want to respond to anything that anyone has said briefly, or are we good?
A lot of what we've said seems to quite well correlate with each other. I mean, in all cases, it's centering back on Jesus, because it is, you look at the newspapers and the news these days, and you wouldn't think the church has anything to do with him.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah,
and is reaffirming and remembering what we are. It's easy to get caught up in not just political divides, but all sorts of divides to say a certain group aren't good enough. Who are we to pass judgment? As some certain famous person said that in the last few years. But it is easy to do, because we are almost encouraged to do that by any form of media, really, except us, obviously.
Yeah.
We're almost encouraged to say there is black and there is white, is good and there is bad, and you're either one or the other.
Yeah. And the cost of that is you can no longer be Christ, because you have to be this or you have to be that. Yeah. So from that process of discussion, now we're just doing a really simple version. It goes a bit. There are other questions that people ask. People ask to give a bit of a faith testimony as well. So, what has influenced you in your faith, and so on. And what they're also, as part of the questioning process, there's what questions do you have for the bishops that they need to consider for the church, and things like that. Yeah. So the process itself is quite positive. It's meant to be a positive process. There are different responses and reactions to it, but I think if we remember that this is a process that's trying to, again, change the church. I know that phrase scares people, but, change the church in Australia into something that's more Christ-like. I think if everyone is aware of that goal, then it gives the council more legitimacy and more purpose. When people in their small groups finish, the moderator types, they kind of agree on what the central thing is. And Jared, you hinted that in our discussion, the central issue was, had to do a bit with, Jesus and so on. We all mentioned Jesus once. So we're all Catholics.
Did, yes,
right, you all passed the Catholic test. So yeah, okay.
I'm in the right place.
Good. You can stay on this podcast, everyone. And then with the moderator's help, this person will type up and say, did we agree that this is what we wanted to include, and whatever else. And then it's all sent, like I said, it's all sent to the Plenary Council online, and they go from there. And individuals can do this. So you can actually have a group discussion like we just had, and then you can walk off and do another one if you want to on your own.
Maybe we should send in our podcast.
And we should. Yeah, we'll send this podcast in. Yeah. I'm sure that will work out well. And they'll contact us straight away.
Well, they don't have to read anything. Just listen.
Yeah, that's it.
Just like they get told to.
Yeah, that's right.
Plenary Council's about listening. And they really can listen. They don't have to read.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's the Plenary Council. There are 3 stages. So the first stage, like I said, is listening. Then there's the gathering stage where they collate and they start turning it into something that the bishops can look at and ponder. In the 3rd stage, the bishops meet, and I think they're having 2 big meetings for this. One in Western Australia, in Perth. I hope I said that right. It wasn't Adelaide. No, I think it's Perth. And then one, because they're going by seaboards, and then on the eastern seaboard. And I think Sydney is what they're going to choose for their 2nd meeting, because it's the kind of like where it all kind of began, with the church in Australia and so on. So that's the Plenary Council, and I'm sure we'll have more to say on it as the process goes along, because there'll be more developments and things to listen to. I'd also mention to our American listeners, because I know that SQPN is primarily a network for a network listened to by people in the United States. It's probably good for all of you to consider that question as well. What do you think God is asking of you as a church in America at this time? Because I know there's a lot of questions. If you look at a lot of American church media, and a lot of things that people are saying, there are genuine questions, not criticisms, but there are genuine questions about the sexual abuse crisis in America as well.
Yeah, and I happen to listen to a lot of American Catholic radio because I really enjoy it. And people ring in, and you know what I really love to hear is that there's a genuine thirst to find out about Jesus and our church. And yeah, maybe pondering these questions would really be helpful for the church in America.
Yeah, and we invite anyone who's listening, if you want to leave some feedback on the question yourself, if you're an Australian or an American or from anywhere else, we would love to hear from you, because these are good things for us as Catholics to discuss as a community. And because all we're doing together is, as we answer the question, we're all deepening our own faith. We're strengthening each other in our thirst for Christ as well.
Well, that's our job as Christians, isn't it? To help each other get to heaven. So
we don't need a council. We got this.
Exactly. I think they should just, like I said, listen to this podcast. All be solved.
It's all solved.
Done.
That's it. Yeah, because we're not arrogant at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. So let's move on now. Caroline, why don't we do a bit of science stuff?
Good idea.
What a fine day for science.
You have any hobbies?
I collect spores, molds, and fungus.
Can you reverse the polarity?
I'll do my best.
Science, 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 science. Science, 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 science. Yeah, I like science.
So, Caroline, I am going to do my absolute best to pronounce this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you wanted to talk today in our science segment about Ultima Thule.
Yes, you can say Ultima Thule, Ultima Thule, Ultima Thule. So many different ways to pronounce it. I've heard it said many ways. But basically, if you haven't heard about Ultima Thule, this is an object outside in the Kuiper Belt. It is beyond Pluto, and
so interrupting Caroline.
Yes,
I try not to think about Kuiper belts and
these
Pluto
boys
being
make me laugh.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we can't help ourselves. As soon as Caroline mentions Kuiper belts, we think of
an actual belt.
Yep. And as soon as Caroline mentions Pluto, we think about the unfair dismissal of being a planet.
Yes. Okay. So
this is the Aussie larrikinism coming in.
All of that aside.
Yeah, go for it. So it's Ultima Thule is an object in space.
It is. And it was discovered by the New Horizons mission from NASA. So this mission, New Horizons, also flew by Pluto in 2014, which was the most amazing thing for me personally, and probably
the photos or images of Pluto were stunning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We never had such close-up photos or pictures of Pluto before, ever. And, you know, before Pluto would be just a tiny dot. We kind of get the fuzzy color of it. But now, thanks to the New Horizons mission sent out by NASA, we actually know what Pluto looks like in detail.
Can I just interrupt? Is this the object that's in interstellar space, or is this still in our solar system?
So it's in our solar system. It is just beyond Neptune. Neptune now apparently is the last planet
No.
in our solar system.
Fake news.
Not Pluto. If you don't know, we all still think that Pluto should still be
on this podcast. It's a planet,
yeah. But it's actually classed as a dwarf planet. And that
discrimination.
Is, apparently one of the criteria of being a planet is to have an influence on the orbit of the other planets. Apparently,
or the name
Pluto
of an ancient Roman god.
Yes, well, yeah, that too. Anyway, getting on to
very easy to sidetrack.
So, how does Ultima Thule fit into this? Well, this is an object that NASA decided to focus in on. It's a fairly large object. It's not. I mean, it's very small compared to a planet or a dwarf planet. It's about 32 kilometers. I'm not sure what that is in miles, sorry, but 32 kilometers long in total. It's made up of 2 lobes, it's called. So they're basically sort of spherical objects that have been fused together. And the significance of this mission is to find out how did our planets form, and why and how. What are these objects made of? And basically the composition, and just trying to find out answers of how does how do planets form? So this Ultima Thule is a really good clue into some really ancient objects that are floating around out there. It's thought that these two objects, one's named Ultima, one's named Thule, they're fused together, Ultima Thule. They look like a snowman or a bowling pin, whatever you feel like, naming it. But they're not exactly spherical. They're kind of pancake shaped. Not pancake, sorry, like hamburger shaped. You can go on the NASA website, look up the New Horizons mission. Actually, I'm not sure if they've been able to update it because of the shutdown. But anyway, the government shutdown. I think I've had a look, and I'm not sure.
Sure, once that's over, we'll get lots of images.
Where you can go is on YouTube on the NASA channel. There's plenty of discussion on this Ultima Thule and the New Horizons mission. And they've had many press conferences and lectures about it. So there's so much information out there. This is very exciting. This is the furthest object that we've seen so far with our eyes or the eyes of this mission. And hence the name Ultima Thule. It means like the furthest object we've seen or been to. And it's just a really good, exciting project. We're still getting lots of data coming through, and the data will be coming in for, I think it's over a year. So there's a lot to study. It's just something really exciting that we're going to be looking at.
Yeah, every object that we see in space that helps us to learn about how planets are formed, or seeing planets at different stages of their development is really fascinating.
And this is really cool too, because these two objects somehow had a gravitational influence on each other. They managed to fuse together. They're forming these two lobes, so they look like the snowman or the bowling pin. And they're actually spinning like a propeller, just spinning at a certain rate. And it just makes you, when you see something like that, rather than getting answers, I think you have more questions. So like, is this going to be a planet? Is anything else going to join this group?
Isn't this what astronomy does, though?
Exactly.
It just gives more questions.
Exactly. And you'll see that during these press conferences that NASA have, there's just so many questions that people have. And a lot of the time they'll be saying, well, we're still getting the data. We think it's like this. We're not sure, but we're always discovering new things. So that's really, really exciting stuff. And I can't wait to see and hear more. And this only happened January 1st, so there's going to be, a bit of time before we get some, really definite answers.
Great. I can't wait to hear what other things come out of that. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
There's so many things happening in space exploration right now.
There's so many.
Probes leaving our solar system.
I could go on forever
probes
about
going to the sun.
The mission. There's the Parker probe that's circling the sun at the moment, which is
at night time, so it doesn't get burnt, or is it?
On the dark side of the sun.
Yeah, sure. Right. Yeah, that's why I let you do the science segment.
Yes.
So let's move on now, and we're going to move on to the world of entertainment. And Caroline has something really interesting to tell us.
I don't know where you get your delusions, laser brain.
This is not what we came here to do.
No. But it's what I'm going to do.
I have a plan. You've got a plan. I have part of a plan. Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
So, Caroline, we're going to start off with you before I throw it over to Jerry a little bit later on down the track.
Yeah.
Because you did something that many of us have not had a chance to do. Many people listening have not had a chance to do. You had a very special tour of WETA Studios.
I did. Yep.
Is it Studios?
WETA Workshop.
Workshop, yep. In New Zealand when you were there recently.
Yeah.
So,
or the WETA Cave, as they call it.
Tell us all about WETA.
Oh my goodness.
Workshop.
I did not ever think that I'd be able to go there. So my husband's family lives in New Zealand, in Wellington to be precise, and we go there every year in January for a holiday so the kids can, spend time with that side of the family. Now, my husband has a really good connection, happens to be the second in charge there at WETA Workshop. And so, because they are friends, we got to have a personalized tour inside the building, which was fantastic. It wasn't one of these tours that you pay for, go on a bus. It was go to reception, sign in, let's go have a look.
Wow.
And oh my gosh, I think I was off, like floating around. I felt like I was floating off the planet while I was there the whole time because I was just so amazed at the opportunity. We were able to, so we started off down in the workshop where they actually grind things and weld things together, memorabilia all over the place, King Kong, King Kong sitting up there on the wall. I saw a big mold of Smorg just hanging on the side of the shed. Bits of, I saw molds of the dwarves. You know how there's that big, it's just one of the big scenes where there's big dwarf statue. I think they were guarding the dwarf cave or something or other inside. And there's just in the movie days. And just lots of Lord of the Rings memorabilia everywhere. So I was trying to listen to the guide and what he was saying, but I was just like, my eyes were feasting on just the memorabilia they had. They had a couple of beds from the old Avatar film just sitting there, just laying around, you know, on the ground there. And yeah, so we went there through the welding, we went through the molding section, we went through there's the design section. I had an opportunity to speak to some of the workers there. They're all so lovely. My goodness, New Zealanders are the most friendly people in the world that I have met anyway. They're so happy to just smile at you and tell you what they're doing. And I got to see some things that they were working on for upcoming things, which I'm not going to say because you'll find out soon enough.
Because episode 2 will be our last podcast after a class action lawsuit.
I signed something. It probably said that I can't talk about it, so I won't. But, you know, I got to have a close-up encounter with the people who actually work on these props. For the films, you know, Lord of the Rings, obviously the big ones, King Kong. There were just so many, you know, of those films that they do work for.
Were there any recognizable props? I held this object that was in this
scene? Yes, definitely.
Or...
So in one of the workshops was just an artistic bench, and they do the hand painting of certain objects. Now, we walked in here and my eyes just caught sight of this beautiful elven sword just laying there on the bench, and we happened to comment on it. Wow, look at the artwork on that. Isn't it beautiful? And they're like, oh, that's a prop from Lord of the Rings. Here, hold it. It's like, oh. And my husband held it, and then he graciously passed it to me. You could see like my eyes popping out of my head, and I held it for a few beautiful seconds. You know, I was like, wow, it's so light, so beautiful, and then put it down on the table.
Which sword was it?
I'm not sure exactly which one it was.
Was it Sting?
They didn't tell you which one it was.
Did it glow blue by any chance when there were orcs around?
Oh, it did, because there were orcs
Sting,
out the front. Oh, no, they were the trolls that were out the front. Sorry. They have these big trolls out the front of the workshop, and one of them's got their foot in the air, is about to stomp on you, and my kids sat under it, did a photo, you know, he's going to stomp on my kids. It was funny.
Lucky you had a sword.
Lucky I had the sword. Yeah, and they have a new technology they're using now is 3D printing. So they're, instead of doing traditional molding now, they're designing on the computer, put the design into a printer, and it prints a part that they need. And then they just assemble these things and then just do all the beautiful artistic, you know, realistic looking work on it. And, you know, I saw there were ladies, you know, sewing hair into figures and makeup on it. And so, oh my goodness, it was so amazing just to be there to see all that stuff. And one thing he did tell us is that nowadays with props, they used to be able to get away with, yeah, it's okay, it looks good. Doesn't matter if we don't smooth off that bit or that bit. You know what? They have to smooth off everything now. Like on swords, they've got to be clean and shiny.
We're in high definition, 4K,
are.
8K,
That's right, because
3D,
every single detail can be seen on the screen. And yeah, like us as movie buffs, we probably have gone, oh, that bit's no good, or we've seen that. Yeah, So they're very aware of these things, and so they are striving for perfection.
Wow.
And the other thing I got from it too is that the technology they used a few years ago to create something is now obsolete, and they've moved on to something else. And they're always pushing themselves because they're always getting demands for this or that. And they really need to push themselves to be able to produce, and they strive for pushing the bounds, and you can really see it in the work, So
it's really cutting edge kind of stuff. It's
cutting edge stuff. The stuff that they've done before helps them to like a stepping stone to what they do now. It's not, and they don't like completely discard the old technology because it does come in handy. It's like they've got small 3D printers now rather than the huge ones that are there, and they're still able to use them for making like tiny little things. They don't just, throw them away. They can actually still use them, for designs or, a small prop that they need to make in detail or whatever. So, yeah, well, I just can't explain how exciting it was to go there and just be, it was such a privilege to be able to walk through there and get that tour.
That's New Zealand's Lucasfield Ranch, isn't it?
Oh, yeah,
it's
exactly.
Kind of equivalent, isn't it?
It was. And, oh, my goodness. And seeing they had all because I'm a huge Lord of the Rings and Hobbit fan, and they just had all these elven props, the outfits, costumes, just, in a row on mannequins, and elven faces on the wall and dwarf faces on the wall that they would have used to model, the faces, and swords and axes and shields and whatever else all over the wall. And I just, my mouth.
Did they have the ring?
I didn't see a ring, but you could buy a ring in the gift shop.
No, that's different. I'm talking about the prop.
The ring, you know what?
They'll probably keep it.
There's probably a few of those.
Peter Jackson probably wears that.
Probably he wears it every day, and that's why we can't see him.
Yeah.
Is that why we can't see him?
No one's seen him for a while. He just takes it off when he makes a movie.
I've never seen him, so obviously he wears the ring.
He produced a movie recently, the big machine one, whatever it was.
I'm not really
Living
sure.
Machine. I forgot what it's called. Yeah, it didn't really strike me as something I wanted to see.
Apparently.
Maybe he just suddenly appears on set.
Yes.
Just in the middle.
Here I am. Hello. And they say, oh, gosh, he's here. I better get back to work.
The whole time. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Peter Jackson, you just never know when he's going
to
turn up.
That's it. He just turns up.
Didn't he? New Zealand's Airlines did a Lord of the Rings once.
They did.
And he was in it.
Yeah.
And he puts on the ring and disappears.
That's right. Yeah, he did a cameo. Yeah.
So that was real. That wasn't for special effects.
No, yeah. I mean, I'm sure he's lurking around there all the time.
He could be here right now.
Literally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was the highlight of my New Zealand visit.
That's any
one of the highlights.
Lord of the Rings or Hobbit, fan would have been really excited to
and other
to do
movie
like
fans. But I mean, there were props from other movies there too. But for me, that was
King Kong. We're talking about probably the Peter Jackson. Obviously, this is all Peter Jackson work. So
but there's
with Jack Black acting like a normal person in a film for once. So,
there were other film things. I mean, I saw even the What's, that's the kids thing. They had some heads hanging around, from the kids TV series that they show here on ABC Kids.
Wow.
It's
interesting because WETA has grown a lot. I remember watching. Remember when they put out Lord of the Rings box sets, with the extended editions of the movies that went for almost 4 hours and whatever.
Yeah.
And they were almost movie length behind the scenes. How the film came about.
Yeah.
And they would talk about how when the film was being pitched when the special effects groups are being pitched to the studios, WETA, obviously Peter Jackson's preferred one, made their pitch, and they made this really dodgy 3D video of two characters whose faces and features you couldn't see, but it was essentially Gollum jumping onto Gandalf's back and knocking his head off. And apparently they weren't impressed, and they had to do something more to impress the executives.
Well, they are impressive.
They've come a long way. Yeah, I was going to say that.
I can tell you. Even they did a few big figures for the Te Papa Museum there. There's a Gallipoli exhibition they've got at the moment. We went in to see it. And they are large figures of soldiers who are actually in the war. And it's like, these are massive figures. I'm saying, like, I don't know how many meters high. But they're in a pose. And they're so realistic, like the leg hairs, the blood, the sweat, the facial expressions. I mean, these weren't for movies, just for the museum. But as soon as you walk in, they have these placed around. Like, it's kind of like a maze that you walk through, and there's a figure, and there's a soundtrack going with the voice reading out a diary entry and sound effects of War of Gallipoli and all the rest of it. And the first one that you walk in, you see it, and it's kind of a low lit room. It's kind of dark. It's like a red hue, and you see the face and you walk in. I almost started crying. It was so realistic. Like, it just hits you in the heart. I mean, this is how good they are. And this was technology from a few years ago. So I can't wait to see what they're coming out with now. But yeah, so they do so many projects, not just film. And there are other projects that I saw they're working on that I just cannot wait to see. But I'm not going to mention them.
Talk about.
Yeah.
It's a really fascinating that you've had a chance to go behind the scenes at WETA.
Yeah.
That's really good.
So, Lindsay, come to New Zealand with me next time.
Oh, let's go now.
Yes.
Where's the pause button? Let's go.
And we've been invited to go back. So
fantastic.
Yeah. I if you maybe next year or year after or something,
we'll have our
back.
next report on.
Yeah, we'll have a look again. So that was my buzz.
Thanks for sharing that. Well, all right, let's move on because we wanted to talk about movies, and we'll wrap up the podcast with this.
Yeah.
So what is it? The two of you have been to the movies recently. I haven't, but Jared, we'll throw over to you because you've had a chance to. Now, by the way, these are spoiler-free discussions, guys. All right, so keep that in mind. But Jared, you had a chance to go and check out Aquaman from the DC franchise. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts about Aquaman and if you think we should go and watch it or not.
So spoiler-free.
Spoiler-free.
That's going to be a tougher one.
Okay, do your best.
All right. I suppose we were actually originally looking to go to see Bohemian Rhapsody. That didn't pan out because there was nothing available. So we looked to see what else. Saw there was a DC movie. Just wandered into there with virtually no expectations. Came out really, really impressed. It's a DC film, as I said, Aquaman, so trying to catch up and keep up with Marvel. And in this movie, perhaps to the exclusion of some of the other ones they've put out, seems to certainly get them on the right track. It's, for me, probably a movie most similar to Marvel movie I'd put it as, is similar to Guardians of the Galaxy.
My favourite. now I need to see Aquaman. I love Guardians of the Galaxy, yeah.
Mainly in the fact that it's not a heavy thinking film. It hasn't got huge issues. It's fun. It's lighthearted. It makes, in some cases, it makes fun of itself. Fight scenes there's always going to be fight scenes, but it's not a movie where you look at it and think, what are they talking about? Where are they going with this? It's straightforward. So going back, essentially it's chronologically it follows Justice League, which came out last year. So it's a year later on. So Aquaman is already a hero, but it's also his origin story. So it takes him back to when he was a child growing up, where he sort of came about from. So he's the product of a land walking father and an Atlantean mother. And so he lives with his, on the Earth, which we'd be aware of from the previous movies. And he's thrown into turmoil because Atlantis is looking to make war on it's hard to say on Earth because in this DC universe, Atlantis is also on Earth or a part of Earth. So it's essentially Atlantis is getting more warlike and looking for an excuse to rally and attack the kingdom. So Aquaman's role is essentially to stop it, avert the crisis, avert the confrontation. So I won't go through what basically happens, but happy ending, which you wouldn't be surprised at.
I was going to say it's more than likely that Aquaman wins, but I've seen Infinity War, and now I've seen Rogue One, and I'm just going to shut my expectations of all these films down.
It's a standalone movie, so you wouldn't be surprised that happily ever after. In a number of ways. There's suspense parts created, but it's not where it wouldn't be a question of what's going to happen. It's like something is likely to pan out for the best because it's not a movie where a noir sort of movie. It's as I said, a positive, a happy,
lighthearted. You were saying,
Aquaman makes fun of himself. There's one scene where they need a drop of water to activate something, and his teammate Mira, who I think she was in Justice League 2, extracts some from his sweat through her intricate mystical arts. And after it's all finished doing its impressive stuff, Aquaman looks down on it and sort of says, I could have just peed on it.
Oh, of course. Yeah, sounds about right.
Sort of off the beat, crass in a way, but without without going over the top or anything like that. So the themes are really he's sent on a journey to go and in a way he finds himself as well, because the beginning of the movie, which you'd be aware from Justice League, there is the Atlantean Kingdom and there is Aquaman, and they are not linked at all, except by their heritage. And so he finds his place, not being a half human and a half Atlantean. He finds his himself as well in his place.
A lot of the origin stories of heroes are about identity as well. Who am I? Where do I belong? Am I a person of this planet, or we're born of two worlds? Or it's very Spock as well. That kind of
So it's a little different.
Of course I did. Of course I did.
Yeah, a little different in that he is already a hero. So, opening scene of him as an adult, he's him being heroic and rescuing a submarine, rather than warming him up to it. A la Spider-Man, where you spend the first hour of the movie wondering when he's going to get bit already. He starts in big and he keeps going that way.
So Aquaman didn't become Aquaman because he was bitten by a toxic sea turtle or something.
No, so I mean, he's got the best attributes of both worlds. I guess we can call it a world, the lost city of Atlantis.
Sure.
Yeah, it's basically a journey of him, as well as averting the inevitable crisis that is about to hit.
Great, cool. All right, thanks, Jerry. So Aquaman, I guess that's a thumbs up, or 3 tridents, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, can go with that. That's Priscilla, my wife, has watched some of the DC movies, and she's been very disappointed by they're very stodgy, they're very tonal, they're not a whole lot of fun to watch, which is where Marvel has been leaps and bounds ahead. There's always a lighthearted moment or something awkward between them where it shows them as human. And I think Aquaman follows that very well in showing that they're not just muscle-bound idiot superhero, do whatever, save the world, and that's me. Gives the character an actual character.
That's good. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Jerry. Caroline, you also went. This was just yesterday for you, wasn't it?
Yes.
And you took some people to go and see the newest Mary Poppins film.
Yes.
Is it Mary Poppins Returns? Is what it's called?
That's a good question.
Or the Return of Mary Poppins?
Mary Poppins Returns. Yes,
okay,
it
right.
is.
So,
it's like Batman Returns, but without Batman.
Yeah, give us a non-spoilery review of it.
So, what I can say, first of all, I would like to just declare that I'm a huge Mary Poppins fan. Okay, I used to love watching Mary Poppins as a child. I've attempted to show my kids Mary Poppins, but they're still a little bit too young to really appreciate it, because like Lindsay and I, our grandma used to show us a lot of musical films, and I used to love them. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, Mary Poppins, The King and I, all of those, and I just love them. So Mary Poppins is one of my favorites, obviously. And so I thought, okay, they're making a new Mary Poppins. Let's go and have a look. So what I will say is that if you love Mary Poppins, you will adore this new version. It's not the same story. It's a carry-on story, and I can tell you that the characters are true to the original story, and the accents are true. Emily Blunt is fantastic as Mary Poppins. The dancing, the singing, the cartooning, everything stays true to the original film.
I wanted to ask about that, because I remember that's, as a child, I remember the biggest thing was, human characters interacting with hand-drawn cartoons. So is that a feature of this film?
They kept that in there, yes. I thought, oh no, are they going to do 3D digital art or something and ruin the whole thing? No.
They didn't call WETA Studios to do Mary Poppins.
I won't say what's in the code, because you really have to watch it yourself WETA wasn't involved in this one. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I give it 3 umbrellas. 3 Mary Poppins umbrellas.
I guess our scores are out of 3 today.
Yes, they're out of 3. 3 being the best. I just really loved it. And, I told you I tried to watch get my children to watch the original Mary Poppins. my eldest son Frankie is now 7, and he loved this movie as well. He was singing and dancing, and the closing credits are a song, and he was just dancing outside, walking outside the cinema dancing. And even my little 4-year-old Harry, who's a bit hard to keep entertained for that long, he actually was entertained for the whole, I think it was a 2-hour film. So, it was great. So go watch it.
Well, it's good to hear. It's good to hear at least that it's not a, how sometimes a sequel is a bit of a cash grab, but in this case, it sounds like
they put in so much effort to keep true to the original themes and the style.
So clearly people who are very familiar with the original film were involved in this.
I mean, all the songs are new and they are the same vein as the original songs. There's a beautiful message in the movie, and it's all family, and it's just you think something's going to go wrong, and then it's all happy in the end because Mary Poppins there to help everybody, like in the first film. There's a few cameo from the original. I don't want to say who.
Don't say. Yeah,
you got to go see it, but that's so.
It might be obvious to big fans who some of those maybe.
It's a bit of a surprise. And it's just so delightful. Like, I don't use the word delightful. Yeah, it's practically perfect in every way. Mary Poppins is very cheeky as like in the first film. I can't say anything bad about it. I just really, really actually. One thing, there is a dance sequence where it keeps very true to, the Dick Van Dyke dancing with the umbrellas and the chimney sweeps and all that. So they put one of those in there. I hope that's not too spoilery. But there's a bit where they do they snap to a bit of a Beyonce dance for about 5 seconds. And it's like, if you're very familiar with the old fashioned dancing, you'll pick it straight. It'll stand out.
It sticks out like a sore thumb. Yeah.
So that was like they were doing it. I was like, hang on a second. And then they snapped back into the old style dancing, the 1960s version,
Fantastic.
Chimney sweep dancing. So, I can't recommend it enough. Go see it.
Great. So, so let's wrap up episode 2 there. So to all of our listeners who are listening to this podcast, please send us any feedback on anything you've heard. Whether it be about the Plenary Council, have you been somewhere special that not many other people get a chance to go like Caroline? Maybe you want to tell us about your experience. Did you watch Aquaman or Mary Poppins? What did you think? Were you going to give them 3 out of 3 or less or more? Tell us what you think. But thank you for joining us for Catholics of Oz. Please, you can send us feedback at sqpn.com/Oz or on the SQPN Facebook page. You can also email us at oz.sqpn.com. All the relevant links from today's discussions are in our show notes, if there are any. But please remember to be sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, or any other place where you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to review us on all of those as well. It helps us to grow and to reach more audiences. And also don't forget, again, the other wonderful shows on the SQPN network. So, Caroline, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you, Lindsay.
And Jared, thank you as well.
Glad to be here.
Once again, I'm Lindsay Sands, and thank you for listening to the Catholics of Oz.